Hi all, today we will focus on creating the API that will interact with our Vue frontend. Before we continue, I want to mention that this is not an in-depth course, it is actually a tutorial. You will learn how to use Node, Express, Sequlelize with Postgres and Vue.js, and also with Tailwind CSS integration, but we'll not go super in-depth as we would with a course. If you are interested in a course using these technologies, please let me know in the comments below. I know I said the word course in the previous video, that is why I wanted to clarify. Now let's go on. If you remember last time, all we did was set up a basic API method, and also we managed to do the migrations and migrate our models into the database. We also saw that there is a database tool for the iPad which allows us to visualize the database and the data in the database, which is hosted on the Raspberry Pi. Now the first thing I want to do is in my models, and I'm going to start with the folder model, I would like to not use the ID anymore so that we don't expose the number of records we hold in the database to the client, but I would like to use a UUID for that. So in this case, the first thing I'm going to do, I will go to the folder JS migration, and under the ID I will use a UUID, and this will be of type Sequlelize UUID, and of course we will not allow nulls, so allow null will be false. And I will add that also to the folder model. So inside the folder model, what I want to do is before name I will create a UUID field, and for the type I'm gonna call this data types .uuid, and I will also set a default value to data types UUID v4. Another thing that I would like to do is to rename the model to lowercase, because I don't like to have capital in the database. So in this case I will leave the module name to folder, and what I will do, I will create here table name, and I'll say folder with lowercase f. And this is it for now. And also because we did this modification, now the table name will be lowercase f folder. So in the drop table here, I'm gonna say drop table folder. One small correction here, it's Sequlelize with an E. And now that we have the folder model created, I will also want to create the photos model. So in order to generate the photo model, I'm gonna open a terminal, and I'm gonna use again the npx Sequlelize client model generate. I'm sorry if the font is too small here, but you have the command from the previous video. So I'm gonna say here the name of the table will be photo, and for the attributes I will add here name, which will be string. I will add folder ID, which will be of type integer. I will add the path, which will be of type string. I will add camera, which will be of type string. I will add the file size, which will also be of type string, because I want to add in megabytes or gigabytes. I'm gonna create resolution, string as well, and some notes, which will also be of type string. And now if I check, I have the photos model. I'm gonna rename it to lowercase photo here, and here as well lowercase photo. We see that we have the ID already created. We will also create the UUID here as well, which will be of type Sequlelize UUID, and of course allow null will be false. We'll also say that the name, it's not nullable. Same for the folder ID, same for the path, and for the rest camera, file size, the resolution and notes can be null. Then we also have created that and updated that, and we also see that we created a photo.js just here under the models. Here I'm gonna say table name will be photo with lowercase p, and I'm gonna create again the UUID also for the photo table. And here I'm gonna say type will be data types of type UUID, and default value will be data types UUID v4. Here we can remove the folder ID and we are good. Also let's remember to modify inside the folders to use create table folder with lowercase f. And I think our models are almost done. We have to do two more things. We want to remove the ID from the JSON response, because as I said, we don't want to show that now that we have the UUID. And we need to define the relationships between the tables. And this will be defined in the models. Let's start with the folder.js. And here in the associate method, we don't add all the models, we just expand and we will only add photo. And here, as you can see, we have to define our associations. And one folder can have many photos. So I'm going to say this has many. Photo is the model. We don't need to import it anywhere because it's part of the models. And here I'm going to define the foreign key, and that will be the folder ID. And as I said, what I would like to do is also to remove the ID from the JSON response. So I'm going to say to JSON, I will overwrite this method, and I'm going to say return this.get ID undefined. And this will prevent the JSON to be returned when we make the calls to the API. Let's do the same also for the photo model. Let's close all the windows and open the photo model. So here we will say folder, we have too many brackets. The photo belongs to, so the association between folders and photos is one to many. So basically one folder can have multiple photos, but a photo can only belong to a folder. So here I'm going to say folder. So I'm going to say again foreign key will be folder ID as folder. Okay, now that we have that in place, what we want to do is to basically drop the tables from the database and create the tables again with the new names and the new fields. And to do that, as I said before, if you remember, we need to run the migrations, and we will do the db migrate undo all. Cool, and now it worked. So now let's do again a database migrate so that we can get the new tables in. So we'll say npm run database migrate, and now we can see we have the folder and the photo with lowercase and with UUID inside as well. And also we have the foreign key constraints, which is great. That shows that our migrations worked. Now let's start to interact with the database and create folders and photos using the API and test that and see how we can test it also using only our iPad, nothing else. So we'll go to folder routes and we'll create the first methods for the folder. So first thing we need to do is to import folder model. So I'm going to say const folder is require models, and now we can work with our folder. So I'll remove this method here, and instead I'm going to say router post because I want to create a folder, and here I'm going to say to slash, and now I'm going to create a method here which will be asynchronous. We will take the request and the response, and for the body I will put the name, the parent and the nodes, and this will be equal to request.body. And here I'm gonna create a try catch block, and here for the catch I'm gonna have an error object, and in the try catch block I'm gonna create a folder by using folder.create method, which we don't need to implement because Sequlelize implements it automatically. All I need to do is pass the body, which is name, parent and nodes, and that's simple as that. And all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say return response JSON because I want to return the folder that I created, or folder. In case I'll have an error, all I want to do is say console.log error, and I also want to return a status 500, which is server error, and I'll have a JSON from the object error. And now let's try to test this method and see how it works. See if we can really create a folder using our API. One thing before we run our project, to make our life easier, I will create here a command called server, so I can do npm run server, and this will be my server. You can name it any way you want, API or whatever you want, and here I'm gonna say nodemon server.js because this is how we run our application. So here, instead of running nodemon server.js, I'm just gonna say npm run server. One thing we need to change is in the index.js we have to use config.js because we changed it to use JavaScript for the configuration. Again, npm run server, and now it runs without errors. So in order to test our API, I will use HTTP bot. It's not free. If you are familiar with Postman, this is very similar to Postman, and we can test our API using it easily. So as you can see here, I have some folders, because I like to keep my requests in folders. So let's create a new folder, and let's say this will be my photo album, and inside our folder we'll create another folder which will be called folders, and here we will keep all the requests related to folders. Now let's get inside and create a new request here. Now our request will go to the IP of Raspberry Pi, which is 10.55.0.1, on port 3000, because as you can see our application started on port 3000, and this will be a post request, and then here I'm gonna say /folders. Why? Because once again, if we look in our code, under folder routes, under server.js, /folders will call the post method here, because this is a post request. Let's also rename these requests. Let's call it create folder, and we're gonna save the request. Now in order to create the request body, since we have a post request, we will select under params raw, and then in the post data we will create a JSON object, and here inside the JSON object we will create a name, and this will be the name of my photo album. So let's just call it first album. Then we will have a parent, which will be the parent folder. In this case is null, which means that this is a root folder, and we will have some nodes, and I'm gonna say this is my first album. Done, and let's run it and see if it works. And yeah, as you can see, we got response 200, but we are expecting to see the folder that we just created. The request is created with HTTPS, and we have an HTTP connection, so we have to modify to HTTP, and then we can run it again. So as you can see, we have an error. So in order to fix the error, what I did is I said app use express JSON, which allows us to receive a JSON response, and then of course I required .f configuration and Sequlelize from models, and now when I start my application I will do a Sequlelize authenticate. I log database connected in case that is successful, and for the get root of the application I redirect automatically to folders. And now if I run my request, I see that it works. It creates an album, it gives it a UUID, it shows this is my first album, and we get an updated at and created at. We can also create another album together, so we can say here second album, and I would say here this is my second album. Done, and then we run again this, and we see we get the second album with the creation date and everything else in there. Now let's check the database and see if our albums are there, and as you can see they are here in our database. So now basically what we have an end-to-end application on which we can create folders using our API. We connect to the database and then we create the folders, and as you can see everything was done just using the Raspberry Pi. So another thing that I would like to do with you now, I would like to move all these requests from the folder routes, because as you can see it looks a bit, let's say, not that clean, in the sense that as we create multiple methods, these folder routes could get quite big and quite hard to read, and for that we can use the model view controller pattern, and we can create a controllers folder, and here in the controllers we will create the folder controller. So I'm gonna say here new file folder controller.js. So what I will do, I will get this const folder from the routes and I'm gonna import it in the folder controller, and here I'm gonna create a method called const folder create post, and I'm gonna assign it the function that we have here. So all this from here till here, we remove it and we assign it here. And what we can do now, in order to be able to use it, I'm gonna say module.exports, and I'm gonna export folder create post. And in my routes, I will import the controller. So I'm gonna say folder controller is required, and here I'm gonna go to controllers folder controller. Great, and here I'm gonna say folder controller folder create post, and this is it. And you see it looks really clean because we just have a method folder create post, and then all the logic is inside the controller. Now let's see if this still works. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna say third album, this is my third album. Done. Let's run it, and we have it in our database. Let's see that this was added into the database. Let's refresh the connection. Yeah, we have the third album added into the database. That's perfect. So as you can see now, all the methods and all the business logic that will interact with our database will be kept here under the folder controller. Now let's create another method that will retrieve all the folders from the database. So here I'm gonna say const folder index, also asynchronous. Also I'm gonna take request and response as parameters, and here I will create another try catch block, and in my try catch block for the try I'm gonna create a constant folders which will be equal to await folder find all. Again, this method we don't need to create, Sequlelize takes care of that, and here I'm gonna return response.json of folders, and for the error we will do just the same as we did with the previous method, and we shouldn't forget to export our folder index method. Now in the folder routes, for the get method, what we will do is just call here folder controller folder index. And this is it. You see how clean our routes file looks like now. And let's see if the method works. We go to the HTTP bot. I already created the get all folders here. Don't forget to remove the S from HTTPS, that we have an HTTP connection. Let's save this request. And if I run it now, you can see I retrieve all my folders from the database. So this method works as well. Now, what I would like to do is now to be able to retrieve one folder based on the UUID, to delete a folder, and to update a folder. I will copy paste these methods and run fast through them because they will be more or less the same as we already did, and we will create all the requests right here. So as I said, I just copy pasted the methods for the folder controller because there was no point going through the same steps again. You can check them on GitHub if you want to have a better look at the code. But just to walk you through a bit, after folder index, we also check the folder details. We delete the folder by using the find one method and then just destroy. And we return a message that folder was deleted. And a bit more complex is the folder update, where we can update either the name, the parent, or the nodes for a specific folder. Now, what I discovered recently is this REST client. It's called REST, that you can install on the iPad. I don't think it's free. I think you can also use it for free, but I'm not really sure if it's free. It's much better than HTTP bot, because in HTTP bot I had the issue where all the requests that I was creating I couldn't save. It was just saving one of them and then I just couldn't save the others. So in this case I managed to save all the requests, and just to show you that update folder works, because for the rest, get or folders by ID we've seen already. I'm just gonna do a refresh because I changed a few things, and I also want to show you one small change that I have made. If we look at our code, under the migrations, we see that the parent type was integer because we had integer IDs. But now that we changed to UUIDs, you have to also change the parent to be of type UUID. And you have to make the change under migrations folder and also under models folder. Once you have done that, you have to run again, and remember that every time we make a change in the structure of the database, we have to run again the db migrate undo all, and then you have to run again db migrate. Also remember that this will delete all the data from the database, so you will have to recreate. But when you have your requests saved in your software, then you can just run them and the data will be there. Now I created a few folders here, and I already modified the iPhone folder, or in this case iPhone 13 folder, to have the parent, the folder with this UUID, which is Brisago folder. Now I want to do the exact same thing for the Canon M50 folder. As you can see, the parent is null, but I want to have the same parent as the iPhone folder so that I can separate the photos taken with the phone from the ones taken with the camera. So now all I have to do is just copy the UUID of the Canon M50 folder, go to the update folder requests, replace the ID of the previous folder with the ID of the Canon M50 folder, and in the parameters, in the body, as you can see here, the name will not be iPhone 13, we leave it Canon M50. The parent will be the same because I want, as I said, to put it under Brisago. And here I'm gonna say pictures taken with my camera. And then I can just run this request, and as you can see now my folder has a new parent. The parent is not null anymore. I can also go into get all folders, refresh, and I see now that the parent indeed it's not null anymore. So this is it for the folder part of our project. Now I also did the exact same thing for the photos. So as you can see in the photos, in the photo controller, I created two methods to create a photo and to list photos. I also created another method here for the details and also for delete and also for update, just the same as I did for the folder. Once again, just the same thing as before. Only change is, for example, if you create a photo, you have to first find the folder, and then based on that folder ID, you add the photo, because photos belong to folders. And basically this is the only change. You can also check the code, and if you have any questions, you can put them at the bottom of this video and I will reply in the next video. Now, as a exercise so that we can understand better what we are doing, you can do the exact same request in this REST application as I did for folder. You can do for photos, and in the next video I'm gonna explain them and go through them in case you didn't manage to do it by yourself. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, or if you have any suggestions, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Also, if you have any questions that I can answer in the next one, you can leave them below. Don't forget to like the video, as it helps with the YouTube algorithm so that more people can benefit from this course. Also, please don't forget to subscribe and press the bell button to receive notifications when the next video will be released. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.